we are going to be asked to justify why we didn't do all these other places that the community is aware of, why we didn't do a building on vacant land. And I did say at the meeting and said in response on the website, since the mid-90s, when Disbro was discussed, and Disbro used to be discussed before we built the additional ball field there, the idea was that it would go at Disbro in what was the wooded area where the new ball field went. And at the time, I have always strongly and consistently opposed it being there. But the context of the discussion that evening was not that George or Catherine were saying, oh, our number one choice is to go to Disbro. It was a due diligence discussion. The public is going to ask, you looked at Disbro over the years it was studied, why now when you ask us to go at location X, what was your analysis at Disbro? What was your analysis at Biltmore? What is your analysis at other locations? That was the fullness of the discussion that occurred that evening, and so maybe some of that got lost in terms of in cyberspace or something, but that was the discussion, and I guess that's the grievance that George and Catherine have, and they're articulating here this evening.
Steve, no one said it was anyone's number one choice. The very fact that we're considering it all, I think, is an egregious way to proceed, and we should not even consider it. And according to you, there's a majority on the council that we shouldn't even consider it. So if that's the case, then why don't we just take a vote on it and we can move on?
But I actually don't know that it's being even considered. The question was the discussion to the consultants. This wasn't a decision-making meeting. This was instructions to the consultants to be sensitive to what the community and the council would be looking at in terms of a report from them. And the comment was, what does it cost to build a police station, not where there's an old CVS building or not where there's an existing police station. What does it cost to build a police station on vacant land? And then a number of vacant land locations were mentioned by a variety of people in the meeting. So I'll tell you that I will guarantee that there are more than enough votes to make sure it never happens at Disbro. But that wasn't the question of the event. The question of the event was, to the consultants, we're going to have to answer why we didn't put it in all these other places around town. And, so I think that was really the discussion as I remember it and absorbed it then. But I will say, since you raised the issue and sort of alerted people that this was a real threat, I don't think it is, I spoke up on the website and said, it's not happening, and I will guarantee, I'll give my personal guarantee that there'll always be 4 or 5, hopefully 7 votes against it going there. But that wasn't the question of the meeting, and
In fact, if I can point out that during the discourse in the meeting, I mentioned to the consultants, that there more likely was not going to be a price differential between what somebody would envision as a different alternative than possibly ours. And compared to spending more money than building on raw land, if that difference was marginal, to get to the location that had been recommended by the judiciary. Now, what my issue with you is, Joe, is that, you feel that me even considering Disbro after it had been on the table for 14 years is egregious, Quite frankly, I feel it's egregious that you threw the Rye Art Center out there, all right? And the insensitivity that you, in your article, wrote about me in terms of being incentives about children and close proximity to perpetrators of crimes and no respect for the residential neighborhood, well, quite frankly, that's exactly the way how I felt when you mentioned the Rye Art Center, and I know why.
I did not mention the Rye Art Center as a feasible site. I said putting it at Disbro would be just as wrong as putting it at a place like the Rye Art Center where it's in the middle of a neighborhood, George.
That's not what I heard, Joe.
I don't recall that.
I don't recall that, and more than one council.
And I said specifically it would be a bad idea to put it there.
Well, that's not my recollection, and that's part of the whole problem.
And
Joe, I really rewrite history.
Since we brought it up, Steve, I somewhat now take exception to your own revisionist history of what happened that night and what you said on the blog. First of all, I don't see why you would object to me objecting to putting it there. Unless you want to come forward, Steve, and be the white knight and say, because of me, it will never happen now, okay? For you to then write on the internet, okay, that I willfully tried to, that I essentially lied about what I perceived happened that night, is really offensive to me. And if you're going to put yourself out there as the mayor and as the leader of the community, if you're going to then attack me in that way on the internet, when I didn't attack anyone, all I did was I said, this is what happened at the meeting, and I'm opposed to it, okay? And if you now, Steve, are going to, gloss over what you did on the internet, I think that needs to be examined a little bit too.
Wait a minute, stop, okay? You don't have the right after what you wrote, okay, to say that you...
Don't talk to me about my rights are, George, and raise your hand to me, okay? I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. If you want to debate,
Go on the line there.
Here's how we're going to do this, order of speaking. The last comment was directed to me, so I'm going to make a brief comment. Then Andy has to be recognized, and Andy will have the floor. Joe, I didn't think that what you wrote was fair to this institution, was fair to your colleagues, or was an accurate description of the discussion. And so I said that in a cogent, clear, simple declarative sentence way, and I have no problem with what I wrote. I think that if one were to put something on the internet or write an article about that discussion, it should have reflected the fullness of the discussion, and certainly should have mentioned that these alternatives are being thrown out there. It's part of a due diligence analysis. I think Catherine and Joe probably would, Catherine and George would probably say, if the numbers come out right, they'd prefer one of the two primary locations. But George was saying, and this was the whole thing which I thought was a very positive contribution to the discussion at the meeting, we are going to be held accountable. When we offer a solution to the community, we are going to have to say, why didn't we do X, Y, and Z, or whatever other things that people can come up, and basically said to the consultant, you need to give us an analysis that sort of corresponds to our having to answer those questions. Andy, you have the floor next.
Thank you. There are seven of us up here. 3 of us have not been involved in what transpired after Monday's meeting. 2 of us have participated in the dialogue that has been conducted on a private or a non-public but publicly accessible blog, and the other 3 of us have not. As one of the 3 of us that have not, I would simply submit that this kind of encounter group and working it out in this way is not necessarily going to lead us anywhere. And I would remind us all that we are more productive when we are playing well together, and we're approaching a time of year where we need to be very productive and very together. My recollections of the Monday meeting are immaterial and would not help anything to throw it out there. I mean, I told Joe directly in a good collegial conversation, because that's what we have this morning, that I didn't think it was a wise tactic to go to that, but that was his choice. He exercised his prerogative to participate in that dialogue. George exercised his to express his dismay with it in this form. We're not going to get any further with this thing. It happened. Let's move on. I think the next thing, if everybody's cool with that, Steve, I think the next thing might be minutes.
I think that's good.
Cool.
I'm happy to be done with it. Okay. Thank you all.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
We have minutes of the meeting of October 15th.